Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so we will start the meeting. Welcome to the Place Resources Overview Committee of the 25th of February 2021. We won't do the normal thing. We go around the room and speak to members. If we're going to ask members to introduce themselves when they first speak, please, that will make things a little quicker and more efficient. Thank you. Straight into agenda item 1. Apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Chairman, no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is the minutes. Can these be accepted as a true and accurate record to be signed at a later date? I hear no dissent, then that's fine, thank you. 3 is declarations of interest. And it's to receive any declarations of interest from members. And members are reminded that if they realise they may have an interest in an item at any time during the meeting, please make us aware so that the interest for the purpose of recording can be made. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? I hear none. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is a chairman's update. I have a couple of things. One, I will mention the APSI report, which is a report from the Association of Public Service Excellence. We have an additional meeting on the 9th of March to review that report, and it's basically for authorities who are striving to improve their frontline services, and that's what we're going to be looking at the report in the first instance on the 9th of March. The second thing is we mentioned at the last Audit and Governance meeting, I brought up the issue of the operator's licence and issues raised by SWAP. By way of an update, I attended a meeting on the 18th of February with the chairs of Audit and Governance and Places and Resources Scrutiny Committee. We met with Mike Moon, who's the head of Waste Operations, and Tim Wolford, who was a service manager for fleet maintenance. They addressed the issues we had concerning the fleet and the O licence implications, and I'm happy to report that we were very content with the checks and balances that have been introduced to actually sort those problems out. Final thing I've got is working groups. We will be asking for members for a working group on the future disposal of assets, and that's portfolio holders Jill Haynes and Tony Ferrari, want a couple of members. We won't be taking those now. We'll send out an email shortly after the meeting and ask for volunteers for that. And the other one is part of the digital working group we'll be looking at later in the meeting. And again, we're looking for 2 members to join the group, looking at the new website. So that's a really, really important piece of work. And again, we'll be asking volunteers after the meeting. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 5 is public participation. We have a question from Mr. John Culvert. And I thank John for that question. And it's going to be read out by Democratic Services Officer Lindsay Watson. Lindsay.
Thank you, Chairman. So the question from Mr. Calvert is as follows. Okay, item 8, Tourist Information Centre funding. The executive summary comments that TICs provide the following key services: free information including maps, local attractions and events, general information about the local area, bus/transport provision and information about accessibility, ticket sales for some transport providers and for local events, accommodation information and booking for the local area. As a resident of Dorchester for over 10 years, I have used the Dorchester tourist information for all these when they were available, and I use them in other towns every time my wife and I visit for the first time. This situation is not recent. There were plans for the TIC to go into the Shire Hall, but then there weren't. The obvious next place was the new library, but no plans there. Finally, the reorganisation of the Corn Exchange surely offered possibilities. The response from Dorchester Town Council is sympathetic, but seemingly at an early stage. My question is this: if tourism is so important for Dorset and in particular for Dorchester, why is the council stopping the funding and releasing the expert staff before agreeing a replacement service? Some transitional funding is no substitute for proper planning. That's the end of the question, Chairman.
Thank you, Lindsay. The question is going to be replied to by Tracy McGregor. Tracy, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm Tracy McGregor, Service Manager for Libraries, and the Tourist Information Centres are part of my service responsibility. Thank you to Mr Calvert for the question about the TICs. As he has mentioned, the two TICs that were part of the former West Dorset District Council, Dorchester and Sherborne TICs, were part of a service review commenced in 2014-15 by the former District Council. During an extended review period, some changes were made to the TICs that were operated by West Dorset District Council, including the relocation of the Dorchester TIC into the town's library, in order to reduce the cost to the council in supporting the TIC function. The review was not fully completed before the local government reorganisation work to create the new Dorset Council took priority. Dorset Council has undertaken a review of the council managed TICs to consider how best to provide this type of service in the future. Tourism remains important to Dorset Council, and the council's economic growth strategy includes support for the tourism sector by developing the Visit Dorset brand and service to support the visitor economy and promote sustainable tourism in Dorset. Dorset Council currently operate and fund 3 TICs across the county, with other TICs being operated at a local level by parish or town councils with or volunteer support. There is disparity in terms of the council support for TICs across the council area, and Dorset Council cannot afford to fund TICs across the whole of the council area. In terms of implementing any change, there have already been some initial discussions with the 3 town councils, and these discussions will continue, particularly once we have a decision about the future provision of the TICs. In addition, there is a period of organisational change management process with the workforce that will take a period of several months to complete, and this provides time for any alternative arrangements with the town councils to be developed and be implemented. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tracy. That's excellent. And again, thank you, John, for that question. Moving on to agenda item 6, we have our first main item, which is the options for the control of disposable barbecues and other fire-related activities. If I could just make a quick comment, I believe the reasons for the recommendation actually cover the most salient points. This 2-step approach considers the cost, the length of time it takes to introduce the new legislation, and the difficulties in enforcement, as well as the effectiveness of various control methods. Like other papers in front of us today, we have to add a dash of reality and openness to the topics. We can only do so much as a council. It's a complex issue and will involve working closely with our partners in the future. Officer's report is Bridget. Bridget Betts, are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
Thank you, Bridget. Bridget is the Environment Advice Manager. Bridget, if you'd like to give your report.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So this work has come after a significant increase in wildfire incidents in 2020. They went from something like 18 to 74, 80 fires. And those are all down to disposable barbecues not being disposed of correctly or campfires. The incidents are mainly on our heathlands and dry wooded areas. We probably all remember the Wareham fire that affected 180 hectares of forest and heathland and cost over 800,000 to put out. And this doesn't include the wildlife costs, the CO2 emissions and the rescue operation of some of those species. Last year, Cabinet working with the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue and other partners to write an options papers, and this is this is the result of it. It's been a fantastic working partnership, so I wanted to thank everyone who took part in it. We came up with 7 options that have provided detail on some background, description of those options, the pros and cons, the financial implications, and where we can, an example and a case study before we made any recommendations to yourselves. And as Daryl said, it's really important to be realistic because ultimately some of those options require quite heavy enforcement, and without any funding to do that, then obviously they are ineffective. So I just wanted to just quickly go through the different options. So the first option was designation of a public spaces protection order, and I worked with Graham Duggan's team who put all the input into that. But in conclusion, we recommended not to pursue this at this moment in time, but maybe evaluate that after this year's season. We looked at the second option is creation of a new council bylaw. To be honest, I couldn't find any examples where this has been effective. They've got them in Weymouth, and that isn't effective because of enforcement. So again, our recommendation was not to pursue that at this moment. Option 3 was the creation of 2 new council policies, the Sky Lantern policy and Balloon policy. That was about fire and litter, and that was that already is in place to a certain degree because it was before LGR. Certain councils adopted it, so it's making that more formal for Dorset Council. And we've got full support from the Fire and Rescue Service for that. And the new policy was the policy on disposable barbecues and campfires. We really felt this would really help our staff primarily because they often go out and talk to people and they don't feel they have any backing from Dorset Council to say what they're saying. They're just saying, we don't want you to do it here. So a policy would be really good for that. So we've recommended both those be adopted. Option 4 was about establishing controlled barbecue areas, and we have a few of those. So and they work really well because they're controlled, but obviously that takes staff management. And we potentially want some in Moors Valley Country Park, but we recommended that be looked into and nothing rushed into this year. Option 5 was to have a community firewise voluntary wardens scheme in the high risk areas. Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue really like this idea because it's like having the eyes and ears on the ground, and they would become sort of our ambassadors for that and could give out our key messages for all partners. So our recommendation, that comes at a cost. So our recommendation is to investigate the partnership funding so that can be implemented as soon as possible. Option 6 was around communication. We already have road signage that works really well, so that won't change for 2021. We've got Litter Free Dorset already running a campaign to our shops and supermarkets to stop selling disposable barbecues, and the Urban Heath Partnership, who are hosted by us and under my team, are running the Barbecue Burns More Than Bangers campaign again, and that had been shortlisted for a national award. But going forward, recommending a clear and coordinated communication in that work, so everybody's doing it together with partners. And finally, the last option, option 7, was the barbecues to be banned in certain locations. And this came up last year because the New Forest National Park and people in Derbyshire had kind of done that, the banning of barbecues. And we've been in communication with them. They're really keen for Dorset to do that. And our recommendation was that maybe Dorset Council could initiate that lead and work with our partners and that link with our policy and communication. So we recommend taking that forward as well. Thank you. I think that's it. You're on mute, Daryl.
The number of times I've said that.
Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Can I just make the comment that before questions from committee members, I'm going to ask Councillor Rebecca Knox to have a word, and she will be speaking as Chair of the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Authority. Rebecca, are you there?
I am indeed, and Chairman and members, thank you very much for endorsing the work that that the officers of all of the organisations have been carrying out. I know it was behind your committee that a lot of the pressure was put on to get this work carried out as quickly as possible, and I'm delighted that whatever your recommendation is today, the actual issue of disposable barbecues and the risk of fires across the county, particularly in hot weather, has now been raised to an exceptionally high place, higher than it was before. So just the discussion itself has really helped. And to support what Bridget said, I know that officers at the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service have really welcomed the approach that everyone has taken, and everyone has listened to each other and afforded each other the different positions which have been thoroughly thought out. It's a fantastic paper. Thank you all. And let's hope, depending on your recommendations and that of the Cabinet, where it'll go to next, it will be just in time for the new season, and let's hope for the country as a whole when we have potentially the easing of some of the lockdown restrictions. So great timing. I'm sorry I pushed so hard last summer, but it was really serious in places, and but it's been well thought out rather than just taken on the hoof. So brilliant work. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Right, we're going to open up to committee members. Les, have you got the list?
Yes, Chair. It's Councillor Carol Jones first, please. Councillor
Jones.
Thank you very much. Carol Jones, representing Sturminster Newton Ward. I feel that we're missing something here, simply because we've got two areas that we have to think about. We've got the destination areas where you've got your holiday makers, your popular parks and so on. But we also have open areas that local residents will want to visit. For example, in Sturminster Newton, around the area of the mill, we have lots and lots of families that want to come here and have a barbecue. And rather than just saying, well, it's a blanket policy, and quite frankly, no member of the public ever bothers looking at policies, why are we not thinking about how to create safe areas? Because if somebody's going to turn up with a barbecue and the meats, they're going to have a barbecue, regardless of whether you say they should or they shouldn't, and we won't have enough control we just won't have the officers to patrol every single area. Can we not investigate areas that are safe to have barbecues and actually put the safe measures in place, places that barbecues can take place? Perhaps they're on raised great big stone areas, perhaps there are these little sort of metal the freestanding barbecue areas where they put their own barbecue within that, so it's off the ground. Because people are having barbecues, whether you like it or not, and they're going on the ground is burning and leaving scorched earth, and there isn't anywhere to dispose of the barbecue, so they're left, so that then brings the rats or the foxes and so on. I just think we just need to think about, we've just got to be realistic and think about how we can make some safe areas where it's allowed and where people can dispose of their rubbish properly, rather than a blanket policy. That's my take. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Carol. If I'm not mistaken, that's actually in the paper. But Bridget, would you like to confirm that? We are talking about dedicated areas.
Yeah, we are looking at dedicated areas, and that work's going to be taken through from Moors Valley, just for everyone though. And I have done a lot of research into that and talked to people like the Weymouth Council who put all those areas in, but it hasn't worked. So they put stone areas in, and people are still not using them. They still put them on the ground and they burn. And if those areas aren't managed, what people are doing is, even if you've got stone areas, the litter is being left and coals are being disposed of. I mean, the idea really, a lot of people like BCP are looking at electric barbecues to avoid all the coals being put in the bushes. You know, there's a lot of, it's not just about fire actually. Our paper is primarily about fire, and in the policy it does say that we would only prohibit where we've got fire risk areas, and there is a criteria that sits with that. So some of our sang areas that we have, that you can have a barbecue, and we say that. So it isn't a blanket ban. I don't want to, you know, that's the detail in the policy. So it is about saying we're okay with it, and we would like to look at some of those areas. But having spoken to Giles Nicholson, who runs the country parks, Well, he runs the whole green space. You know, they have so many issues with barbecues. Unless they are managed by staff, then who at those areas in Sturminster, Newton, who is going to do that? You know, who's going to go and check? And that's the issue quite often. So it isn't a blanket ban.
Thank you, Bridget. Carol, I think what we need to look at is perhaps input from local members where they have areas like the one you've identified into Bridget. It's just we've got a larger picture of the whole of the area. That would be useful moving forward.
Yes, please. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that'd be really good.
In areas where you've got houses in multiple occupation, they have no outdoor space. This is what they do every weekend, and we need to find a way of making it safe.
And that's spot on. It's the local knowledge we need to suck in. Yep. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Bridget. Next speaker.
Chair is Councillor David Taylor.
David.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Les. It's Councillor David Taylor from Chelmsford St Mary Ward, which wraps around the north of Dorchester, and I also look after Dorchester Town Council. Commendable for the report, I must say. I read it with great interest to see where we were going. Fining aspects. Have we looked at any fining aspects to see where we can actually get fines put on in case we catch the people? Have we looked at that?
Bridget, do you want to respond?
What, fine people who are having barbecues?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting because I have spoken to people in environmental health and in Graham's team. Is if we have a policy to prohibit barbecues on our land and someone ignores that, can we fine them? And that is very difficult because there isn't any legal standing in that. So it is difficult. It's meant to be a deterrent, really. It's a statement of our wishes, and without any hard backup, it's difficult to say that. So. Yeah, I think if it doesn't work, then we would have to look at a PSPO order. That's what we would have to do. And you know, the reasons we haven't done it for this year is because it takes so long. It's quite hard hitting. You need enforcement. So it's about trialing something and acting as a deterrent as opposed to something that is going to be legally bounding.
Yeah, I think that's the message, David. This is basically. Adopt these rules, monitor for a year, see what responses we get, see how it works, and then perhaps move it forward if we need to. And of course, scrutiny is actually looking at the whole issue of enforcement almost as we speak.
That's the thing, Chair, I was looking at, is that how are we actually making sure that it's enforced across Dorset so people are fully aware when they come into Dorset and they start lighting barbecues that they are doing wrong? That's sort of trying to get a message out.
Well, within the text, it talks about all the messaging, the comms message, and actual dedicated sites. So that is being done. We need to put those in place properly and then monitor to see if they're actually working. I think that's where that's the next real move, to be honest. And as I say, scrutiny committee is looking at the enforcement issue.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
And the next one, Les.
Yeah. Ray Bryan, did you have a request to speak? If not, it's Roland Tarr.
Councillor Bryan, are you there?
I most certainly am. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm obviously going to fully endorse the report, and obviously we're listening very carefully to what's being said this morning, because obviously before it goes to Cabinet, I will have a conversation with Bridget as to whether we can tweak in line with some of the requests made this morning, which are essential. I've picked up what Councillor Jones said, and I really appreciate the input she put into that. The point I'd like to make, if I may, Chairman, is last year when we faced this problem, we put out a vast number of signs on all the roads entering into Dorset, and I think because we are expecting quite a heavy influx of tourists over the next few months as lockdown goes, we need to make sure we do absolutely everything we can this year whilst we go through this first period. So I shall be working very hard with Bridget, her team and the Highways team to make sure we get signs absolutely everywhere. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ray. I should have introduced Ray. Ray's the portfolio holder for Highways, Travel and the Environment. Thanks, Ray. And the next speaker.
Councillor Roland Tarr, please.
Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I've just reorganised all my stuff so I can. I think it's an excellent report. I'd like to propose that we accept it with the amendments which Councillor Bryan and various other councillors have mentioned, just to look at things which could be covered. One thing I can't find in it, it says that we should contact landowners, which is quite important if you think about places like Lulworth. But I think farmers in the area which I'm responsible for between Dorset and Weymouth, there was a lot of 28, or I think it's now 40 something day camping in the summer with a lot of fires, and I think farmers should be included in that. And the other thing we have quite a lot of in this ward are the Dorset Council wedding venues, and I think they should participate as well, because quite often I would imagine people at a wedding would ask the owner of the venue if they can have a nice fun release of lots of fire balloons, and so I think there are two groups there that perhaps, oh sorry, yeah, Bridget.
So I was just going to respond to that. So if we have a policy, then we would put that in those documents, that because we have a single-use plastic policy as well. So those will sort of get written in to anybody using our land. So it becomes really a lot easier for us to implement that, rather than just somebody saying, well, we just don't want those sort of things.
Yeah, the point I was making is that that land, which is used by farmers for, well, even for permanent campsites, but for temporary campsites, it's very often a hilltop field between here and Weymouth, between Dorset and Weymouth, and it's very often people want to light a fire. That's what they come down from London to do, and so it's not council land. It's owned by perhaps a landowner, but also possibly by a farmer who actually operates usually the facility. And it's farmers and wedding venues also not owned by Dorset Council. I'm thinking of places like Cane Park, where the owner advertises the site as lots of stately homes make excellent wedding venues, and it might be, I think they should be included in the list of people that we should contact over this. That's all.
I think, Councillor Tarr, we will be talking to others, but at the end of the day, it is private land, and we have not got a great deal of influence on that.
We can inform them of our policy, that's all.
Oh, we certainly can.
Because we give them the licence to have the wedding, so at the same time we can.
Yeah, understood. We certainly can speak to those sort of people. Thank you. Next speaker.
Councillor Jesperson, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, before I make my comment, I would like to support what Councillor Tarr has just suggested there. It might be that lots of these private landowners using their land for campsites and wedding venues and that sort of thing are doing it on a slightly ad hoc basis. I know certainly some of the glamping that goes on in my ward, it's slightly ad hoc, and they've never really thought about things like single-use plastic or fires or the lanterns. And so I think it would be well worthwhile having a concerted effort. Even though if we can't say to them, you may not do this, we could say to them, look, it would really be a good thing for everybody if you didn't do this. And given that most of the people that they are, that will be their customers are going to be young people, when they say to them, actually, we don't do this and this is why, those customers are going to be quite comfortable with that. They can say, all right, hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that's fair enough. It's not good for the environment. So I would urge us to be proactive about that and make it part of our comms programme, even though we're not, we don't own the land. The second point I wanted to make, and I'm very aware and very, of course, very supportive of the point that Councillor Jones made about people will barbecue. I do have a concern, though, about putting barbecue sites in places all over the council, including places like Sturmst Newton Mill. If you put a barbecue site there, you're sending out a message that this is a good place to have a barbecue. Before you know where we are, we'll have a list on our website of sites where we've got a barbecue, and we're marking them down as good places to have a barbecue. For many of these sites, if you then make them available and you promote them, or they become well known for barbecue sites, you've fundamentally changed the nature of that site, because then when people who are not barbecuing, and people like me who don't care for a barbecue, and vegetarians and vegans go there, what they're faced with is a place that smells of barbecue, and you've made a really profound change to some of these open spaces by introducing the concept of barbecue. So I would like to add that into the mix before we're too hasty to say, let's make it easy for people to barbecue. Actually, I would quite like to make it quite constrained as to where we do encourage people to barbecue, and Sturmston Newton would be one such place. Sturmston Newton Mill would be one such place where I would be, having known it for more than 60 years, I would be very disappointed if that became a regular barbecue site. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really interesting counter argument, and I think when we look at getting that sort of local knowledge together, informing us of which sites should and should not be in place, then that will all come into the mix. Thank you, Sherry. Next speaker, Les.
Chair, Councillor Val Apothecary.
Councillor Apothecary.
Thank you, Chairman. Val Apothecary, Gillingham Ward. I would just like to say what an excellent report we've got here. I think people have worked very hard. I think I agree with all 7 recommendations, and I think the recommendation 5 with the proposed fire warden will help an awful lot with issues and actually just educating people.
Yeah.
I support what Councillor Tarr and Jesperson have said regarding advising private landowners to policy, and that's another education issue as far as I'm concerned. It does seem to me that the problem tends to be nearer the coast where it's naturally drier, and of course we're up against irresponsible behaviour. Frankly, whatever we do, there are people that behave irresponsibly, and there's very little recourse we have on that. But I think it's an excellent report, and I'm very happy to second the proposal to agree with the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Apothecary. Yeah, we did have Councillor Tarr actually propose the recommendations. I'll take you as a seconder for that. The next speaker, please, Les.
Councillor Ryan Hope, Chair.
Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. To me, a policy that has no enforcement is merely just guidance, and it does concern me there what use this policy will be. I think, I really support that what we need to be doing around this is looking more at the education, as well as working with our licensed premises and areas that we know where the barbecue hotspots are, filling with signage, is actually those that sell disposable barbecues and the likes of. We should be also encouraging our education guidance with those premises. As Councillor Bryan said, we are going to have an influx of visitors to Dorset this year, all being well with COVID restrictions lift, as we all hope they will, and the plan. And I think it is really important that education is given to everyone that is coming to these areas, because we do not want a repeat of last year's devastation in the woodlands with the fire. So I think education by hitting those that sell these, Facebook marketing campaigns and signage is the way to go forward. Yep. I also do support, and this is similar actually, we're looking at on Weymouth Town Council, where I also sit, at actually creating barbecue areas, because then you can look to facilitate those with the requirements of the disposal methods, correct areas, and places, whether they be elevated or hard stone, to ensure that, if people are using disposable barbecues, they can dispose of them safely and they don't become a fire risk by heating dry elements. But my major concern here is we're talking about a policy, but not really any enforcement alongside that.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Yeah, I think it's quite clear in the paper that we will actually use this as the initial draft, if you like, and then monitor it for a year and see actually how effective it is, and then with the possibility perhaps public space protection orders at a later stage. And the next one, Councillor Fry.
It's myself in the RTS.
It's yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of words. I would support the thoughts of enforcement. I like the report, and I'm all for education and encouragement for people to change their behaviour. But there comes a time when you do need enforcement. So I would welcome the to see a process that can be smoothly taken up. My other concerns are around the fire wardens. I absolutely welcome those. I think they'd be really good. But in the report and the job description, I didn't see anything in there about if they're proactive and enthusiastic about their role, and they come across somebody who are lighting a barbecue, what their role is and what their task is there, because we will be putting them in a position of dilemma, how they act there. They can certainly advise, but if their advice and guidance is ignored, what is the action then?
I thank you for that. I think we can look at that as we move forward, to be honest. There is already a part-time officer in place who actually carrying out that role, so I'm sure he must have similar issues and problems which we can actually learn from.
Chair, next up is Councillor Pauline Batstone.
Councillor Batstone.
Good morning, Chairman. I speak in support of what Pauline Batstone, Blackmore Vale Ward. I speak in support of what Carol Jones has said. We need to look perhaps rather differently at the North Dorset market towns compared with the coastal tourism areas, because the folk who are, as Carol has said, causing problems through their use of the portable barbecues in our recreation field in Stir and by the mill are very much local people living in crowded accommodation or getting out with their kids and relaxing. And my request is that we work with the town councils and parish councils to actually ensure what's the best way to move forward, because we don't want to discriminate against those folk who have every right to enjoy our countryside. Like Sherry, I hate the smell of barbecues, but that's not everyone. So my plea is to work with our town councils for their views as to how we deal with this in the smaller towns. Don't just have a blanket policy there.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Batstone. I totally agree. I think that's something we will do naturally. In a lot of cases, we'll be using town and parish council land anyway, I'd imagine. Next one up is...
Chair, Councillor Laura Miller did indicate that she wanted to speak after members, but that was a couple ago. So whether she wants to come in now or whether she wants to speak after the other members.
Down the bottom of my little list here, Les, because you did actually ask at the end of members. So we'll leave it until the end of the members. Councillor Starr, I think you're next, aren't you?
That is correct.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just like to say, like many others, it's a very good report, and it shows that it's really a difficult issue, isn't it? And there are no easy answers to difficult issues, of course. So what you've got to do is apply different things in different places. For instance, I do like the idea of having. I should have said I'm the councillor for Upton and Litchett. We've got a sang in Upton, which is about one of the few open places we have, and that'd be a good place to have a dedicated area, I think. But of course, then you've got the problem of how you look after it. You'll have to have things for people to put hot coals in, as well as all the other rubbish, and then it would need clearing, etc. But I think there, for instance, it could work. But remember, the issue that's really brought this to a head is the fire in Wareham Forest, and there I don't think dedicated areas would probably work, because you've got so many different small car parking areas all around the forest that people access from. So I think the only thing we can do is we need some sort of a stick to go with the carrot, if you like. But we also need education. We need to put signs up explaining why they shouldn't take barbecues. But there's always a hardcore that won't take any notice of the signs, I realise, but I think that'll explain it, and be reasonable people will take notice of it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Starr. I think Councillor Bryant was quite clear that we need to look at signage, especially as we move out of lockdown. Now, that's all of the committee members. I've just seen a message from Councillor Laura Miller that she needs to leave fairly rapidly. So, Laura, if we take you next, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's really kind. I just wanted to add my thanks. I think this is a great report, and I know how much it's going to be welcomed by people, especially litter picking groups and volunteers and people like that. I just wanted to quickly mention, speaking as one of the ward members for West Purbeck, which includes the Lowell Estate, and speaking as a volunteer litter picker who was constantly picking up hot leftover barbecues and dousing them in the sea. Of course, it's not quite such a problem on the beach, the fire risk, but people were taking them up onto the cliffs, children getting them, treading on them. It's it's not good. And one of the things that we're working on for specifically Lulworth, but I know across the whole coastline with the comms department, is how we can educate people to have that kind of collective sense of environmental responsibility. Because I know that actually that's something that's really gaining a lot of momentum at the moment. It's quite a cool thing. You know, my son wouldn't dream of littering, my 18-year-old son. It would be seen as incredibly uncool. You know, so I think we really need to harness that and really, I personally, I'd just ban them. But, you know, I've seen the damage they do. I've seen kids with burnt feet. I don't like them. But at the same time, I do recognise you have to be a little bit balanced on these things. But I just wanted to add that the comms is so important, because how this is done is almost more important than enforcement. I think if you can take people with you, which is what we're trying to do in my little bit of Dorset, then you've really won the battle. So I just think this is a brilliant report, and if we can really push this up, you know, I'd be delighted. So, and thank you for letting me speak, Chair. I'm going to disappear in a minute.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, son. I see there's a number of speakers actually come up. If you've got anything different and new to actually put into the debate, welcome that comment. But Les, whoever's next.
Councillor Jill Haynes is the next chair.
Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jill Haynes. I have the portfolio for customer and community services. And actually, Laura Miller has virtually said everything I was going to say. I think going back, as PSPOs are in my portfolio area, I think this is something that we need to spend more time looking at and see how this summer goes. It is about education, but it's also about community involvement. So I'll not say any more at the moment. We have a lot of work to do.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jill. Next is
Councillor Roland Tyre would like to speak again.
Very quick.
If it's fresh and new, I welcome it.
It was a very quick point. I was involved with the Army Rangers being open to the public in the 1970s and 80s, and also the Cheshire Ranger Service, the Peak National Park Ranger Services. And we had the problem of how rangers, who are not have no statutory powers as such, could actually enforce the law. And we got training from Cheshire Police and from Dorset Police, which enabled them to know what their powers were, citizens arrest and so forth, to know what to do if things went completely wrong. And a good example would be on the Army Ranges, where we caught somebody collecting very rare birds' eggs on Gad Cliff. The local rangers, the Army Rangers, that happened to be there by pure chance. The local rangers rang the local police, and they were there within about half an hour. Those egg collectors were caught and dealt with by the police and by the courts. So there are ways of dealing with volunteers, and I'm sure that our countryside department are very capable of organising that sort of line of action.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Tarr.
Chair, just to come in on that point, on Councillor Tarr's point, the first is collection of eggs is an offence and can be dealt with under the criminal powers. At the moment, lighting the barbecues is not necessarily a criminal act, so it's slightly different powers needed.
Yeah. I knew I'd had a man there somewhere who knew these things. Thank you.
Councillor Beryl Ezard is next.
Councillor Ezard.
Yes, good morning and thank you. I wasn't in on the beginning of the debate, but I've certainly read the papers and they're fantastic. Actually, as far as they go, I'm a bit disappointed that nothing's going to actually be done this year, but I can see the reason why. Can I just say and add that actually Corfmullin Parish Council and a group there have already got a fire watch group, and they have been mentioned in dispatches in various places. It was a wonderful pilot scheme that started, I think, last year or the year before. So it's really quite an exemplar if anybody else wants to start that up. So Councillor Barron should have some details about that. I mean, I'm Wareham, but obviously we were involved in the horrible fire last year. That many acres of forestry at Wareham Forest was devastated. It is growing back, but we do need to keep a very close watch on everything all the time. And I'm a litter picker as well, so I mean I know what it's like. So yes, I support this, and I'll go forward to look with interest in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gerald, can I come back on that?
Yes, Bridget, go on.
Sorry, can I just come back on that?
If we keep it brief, because we're trying to wind this up now. I think.
The options are for this year, so the majority are for this year, and also the Firewatch scheme that you were talking about it's just an extension of that. So it's just to make more wardens available rather than just the local community houses that live in a fire risk area.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Cherry Brooks.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I've read the report. Good report. Thank you. And but I just want to make one point. We seem to focus very heavily on barbecue being the source of the fire at Wareham. The investigation actually said that it was either a barbecue or a campfire, but they did find some disposable barbecues in that area. So I'm keen that we keep dedicated areas for either campfires. If they're, campsites, we've got one down the road that regularly has campfires over 28 days, but make it safe. So I just want to urge really that we get it right for the tourists and that we don't throw the baby away with the bathwater and come in with a policy that actually stifles anything. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cherry. Yeah, I think it's all to do with the signage on those sites. I think if we get that right, we're halfway there. Okay.
Chair, the only other person, Ray Bryan, put in another RTS, but he's disappeared off my screen. So whether he did want to speak, I'm not sure. But other than that, that's it.
Councillor Bryan, any last comment?
Chairman, if I... No, Bridget has dealt with it. I just wanted to make people realise this is this year we're talking about, not that we're not doing anything this year.
No, I'm sure you'll get your signs out before the masses arrive. Thank you.
Lindsay Watson's got a question there.
Yeah, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. If this is appropriate, if we have got to the point where we are going to start coming back to the proposal made, if you're happy, I just had a quick question about it.
Well, I've got the basically the proposed by Councillor Tarr, seconded by Councillor Apothecary, that we accept the 7 items as written.
Yeah, so I just need to check, because when Councillor Tarr proposed, he said I proposed the recommendation with the comments made, and I just wanted to clarify. Did that affect the wording of the proposal?
No, not as far as I'm aware. I mean, with the comments, I think throughout the meeting, which we need to pick up on, which we have got recorded anyway, so we'll have those.
Yeah, I mean, and the comments will be obviously available to the officers and the portfolio holder to carry forward to Cabinet. So as long as we are content that that is what we are dealing with.
As proposer, I'm happy that Bridget processes the thing and continues with it as we've agreed.
So, Councillor Tarr, we're talking about recommendations as written. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Apothecary. All those in favour? Are there any against? Sorry, listen. Are there any against?
No.
And any abstentions?
No.
Then that is carried. Thank you very much. Right. Excuse me. Next item on the agenda is item 7. Which is developing Dorset's digital strategy, and I have to say at this moment in time I am one of the converted. At the December Overview Committee, we reviewed the digital vision in draft form and gave our opinions as to what further revisions may be required. That final document is back with us today, with actually a delivery plan. There is one small comment I would make, and that's throughout the document it talks about staff, it talks about workforce. There's rarely a mention of member. I'd like member added to that text somewhere along the line, but it's a very, very minor point. It's a very good document. And again, the only thing I thought I'd mention is there's been a bit of confusion about the number of people online. And I know we had that full council figures mentioned, so I've contacted the senior comms officer digital. We've got basically that using the figure of at least 10% completely offline is correct, but there is also a number of the offline population which gives us an online population of 30,000, offline population of 30,000. In addition, there are a further 20% who are digitally disadvantaged or disengaged, i.e. a lack of all essential digital skills for work in life. So together we are looking at around 30%, which actually affects what we do in the future, I think. reporting officer is Dr. Deborah Smart. Deborah, are you there?
I am here. I wonder whether Councillor Wolf just wanted to say some things just to introduce what we've done with the amendments to this as we've gone forward. Peter?
Councillor Wolf, can I just make sure he's the corporate development, corporate portfolio holder for corporate development and change. I got it there eventually, Peter.
Thank you very much, Carol. And yes, almost as if to echo your point about being member led. These things must be led by the appropriate member who's got that appropriate portfolio to ensure that this isn't something that is going ahead without member involvement. So I'm just going to do a short introduction, and then I was going to suggest that we hand over to Lisa Tricky, who you will all be aware of, who is going to talk through some of the detail, and Deborah Smart can come in and sweep up.
Right. Okay, excellent, Peter. Thank you.
The two or three things quickly. The point you make about adding members in, I will take that away. I'm very keen to make it clearer that this is member led, and that's why I'm talking first. But if there is a need to amend that to change the report, and I will take your points and do some more work with the relevant officers about the numbers offline, online, and the disadvantaged and the disengaged. I take that. Can I first of all say I'm really grateful for the feedback your committee gave in December. We've made changes to the document as a result and have supplied, as you say, a work plan for the next 18 to 24 months for your consideration prior to the going to Cabinet for approval in April. The work plan is still draft and needs more work on it, so happy to get any feedback either now or later. It will be an evolving plan, so please don't feel that if you don't make a comment now you won't be able to later. You know from the recent members seminar that we ran last week, last week that we ran for members, that connectivity is a particular challenge in Dorset, and this is not something we can address on our own. We are beholden to be completely honest, we are beholden to BT primarily and the government secondarily, and we're working with members of the Digital Place Board and exploring both public and private sector organisations. And you should be aware that the leader and I have a fortnightly meeting with the MPs, and we raise issues of concern and things that we want them to do in Westminster. One of the things we raised quite some time ago was our lack of connectivity, and it was agreed that Chris Loder MP would act as the focal point of all of the MPs that represent Dorset Council, and would take this forward and make representations to Matt Warman, the Minister. He has done that, and he did so as late as recently as last week to try and demonstrate that we are concerned about the growing gap in terms of digitally enabled, primarily because we're a rural area, and we've got some response from the Minister. It's sympathetic, but there are no absolute details in there. So in terms of connectivity, it's certainly beyond the council's control and our financial resources to deliver the connectivity we all aspire to, but we will be developing an approach which can involve everyone to help us take that forward. And one of the things I did in terms of the members seminar was make sure that we discussed that in some detail last week. So I'm really pleased that the vision you have identified that has been produced you are broadly satisfied with. I'm very happy to take any suggested changes, including the ones you've talked about already. I think the vision gives us a comprehensive approach to be able to maximise the opportunities it provides here in Dorset, and I look forward to taking it to Cabinet with any changes and discussions you have today. And through you, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Lisa Tricky to talk in a little bit more detail about some of the other issues in the report. Thank you very much, and obviously happy to take questions at the end, of course. Thank you,
Peter. Lisa, are you there?
Thank you, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
Good. Can see you now, yep.
Brilliant, thank you. I wasn't going to say too much because there was a good discussion at the last meeting. We've made some changes as a result. We've produced an extensive plan of work based on the feedback that you gave us and the priorities, improving the website, digital inclusion, our use of data and business intelligence, and a range of activity around connectivity and infrastructure. I think the point that you made about the digitally excluded number, is really, really important, but it is a difficult number for us to calculate. And we have had some very recent research from the Heseltine Institute that has made us look at how we estimate that number differently. I think importantly, we've got a range of initiatives to help us try and address that. And you know, we know we've got a challenge, and we know we need to do things about it. I hope that the vision isn't seen as a technology strategy. It is about how we can use the opportunities of technology, but that will help us really address the broader council plan priorities and the challenges that we're faced with in Dorset, and how we can make sure that everybody has the opportunity to benefit from digital technologies. I hope that you can see evidence that it's already happening. This isn't something new, it's something that we're actively working on. And I think at the recent members' seminars on digital and data, we've helped to demonstrate practical examples. So we heard from a resident about the impact of working with a digital champion and what that had on their life. And providing opportunities for councillors to develop digital skills, the 5G project and the new performance dashboards. So in some areas we will start to see progress quickly, but other areas will take longer because we cannot solve the problems alone. We need to change the way people think and embed changes into our leadership and culture work with the council and the broader system of Dorset. So some work is more longer term, like the customer platform, which we need to get right and develop over time. The other point I really would like to stress is the world around us and technology changes really fast. So I don't expect the delivery plan to look the same in 18 months' time. We will need to adapt and flex as we've done to changes over the last 12 months. But importantly, it does provide us with a framework for all the activity that is taking place, which needs to come together in order to give us the impact that we need for Dorset. And gives people an idea that are working with us and employees of our ambition and intent and where we're headed. So happy to take any kind of questions and further feedback. Oh, Deb, sorry, did Deb want?
Thank you, Lisa. Deborah, have you got anything to finish with?
I'll just say something very briefly, which is that this represents the broadest possible interpretation of digital alongside many other councils, and Lisa has done a brilliant job of leading that through and across the whole council. So truly one council response beyond my directorate and across the council. So this represents work of many different departments coming together.
Thank you very much for that. Members.
Chair, you've got one person so far. Councillor Roland Tarr would like to speak.
Councillor Tarr.
I would just like to say that the service we've had from the ITS sections and the people who work for this council has been absolutely fantastic over the last 2 years that I've been working with the council as a councillor. I can't believe that any other council has achieved quite so much in such a short time. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I used to teach IT at Hardy's, and a lot of my pupils are now using that IT to work for the council, so I know quite a lot about it. I've just got one quick query, and that is on page 9 of the Digital Dorset leaflet. There's a picture of a person paying with an iPhone or a mobile phone. I don't think we take, and this is something for the future, anything like enough money from people in Dorset. We're always short of dosh for every scheme we look at. We need to collect more from people, and one of the big sort of sources of money for most councils in London, they actually pay for all their bus passes and things like this from the money from car parking. And if we want a greener Dorset and a digital Dorset, those two things can be combined. When I park in London, I park outside the, as it happens, a house of a cousin. I go away for a fortnight and I pay on my iPhone.
Councillor Starr, can we keep this to the digital paper we've got in front of us, please?
I think parking should be. I don't want to propose any amendments. Purely that when we're thinking about this, we should look at the opportunities for earning money from this source.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to recommend we adopt this report. It's very wide-ranging. It's clearly a living document as we're going forward, and I've been very impressed the way the council has adopted the digital work we've all done, and also the other people that I'm in contact with across Dorset, the Rotary clubs I'm in, even Age UK, of really working forward and taking stuff forward. So I think this is the way forward, and I'd like to recommend it.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. I think we are probably at, in fact, we've got somebody just come up with the right to speak. Councillor Hope.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. No, I think all of our points in December have been well captured in this secondary report, and I'd like to second the proposal and move to the vote.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Hope. We have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour of the recommendation as written?
Yes.
Are there any against? Any abstentions? Then that is carried. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to item 8 on the agenda, which is Dorset Council's Tourist Information Centres, the service review. We have a recommendation in front of us. I would just like to say that just to remind members really that TICs are a discretionary service, and Dorset Council in a nutshell cannot afford to fund TICs. There is certainly a disparity in the area for the council's support to these TICs, which needs addressing. I think we just have to mention the public consultation. We had 990 responses, which was excellent. We had meetings with each of the town councils, and the consultation results provide support for finding alternative service delivery models by working with other organisations. And again, just one thing to note, I think nearly 50% of the people on that consultation were not aware of Visit Dorset. So that again, that's something we need to actually have a clear and very clear comms message about. Right, the officer reporting is Tracy McGregor. Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that introduction as well, which was very clear. As the Chairman has said, this report brings forward a future provision for the 3 TICs which Dorset Council is currently responsible for. We've undertaken a service review in the autumn into the new year to explore how the TICs are used and how the council can provide the service in the future in a fair and equitable way across the entire council area. As the Chair has said, there is disparity across the council. Dorset Council currently provide 3 TICs, and there are 5 others across the council area that are run in a different way, either by parish or town council support or with a volunteer model. As part of the service review, public consultation has been undertaken, and the report does include the headline results from that consultation. The results do indicate that there was a strong level of support for the TICs, which are used both by local residents and by visitors. And there was also support for finding an alternative service delivery model by working with other organisations. And we've had some initial discussion with town councils in those 3 towns. The report asks the committee to endorse the 4 recommendations to go forward to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy. Right, questions for committee members. Have we any questions?
None so far, Chair. I'd like just to make a couple of comments and observations, please.
Yeah, far away, Councillor Fry.
In relation to the current tourist informations that we do have, can I just point out they don't necessarily benefit the towns that they're located in. They're actually there for the wider area, a bit like a network. And we have all the areas in the villages and the events. And should we take Dorchester as an example? The events promoted will also include Abbotsbury and Sir Abbas and the places around the wider areas. But Dorchester charges the precept of about £190, whereas the parishes only pay about £40 per year on average. So it's not necessarily in the interest of the town or the town council to run it for everybody else's benefit.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fry.
Councillor Carol Jones is next.
Councillor Jones.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm absolutely fine with the recommendation. I don't have a problem with that, but I do think that perhaps we could take this opportunity to look at the Visit Dorset website, because if we're looking to increase tourist traffic into Dorset, I think it should be a little bit more seamless, so that if you sort of go into Explore and you want to explore a certain town or a village or whatever, you should actually be able to link straight through to that and then find the accommodation within that particular vicinity and so on. So I think that if we've got a little bit of money, rather than tourist information centres, if we can, I think we need to tighten up Visit Dorset. It's not quite seamless enough. It doesn't take you easily into an area then to see what you can do in that area, where you can stay in that area, where you can eat in that area. If you're in an area, I think it could be, I think we'd need to take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. You're spot on, to be honest. If I remember a few years back, we used to have a Dorset app, and I had it on my phone, and it did just what you described then. And I think that's something we need to have a good look at, and like I said, as we develop the Visit Dorset website moving forward. Thank you. Who's next?
Chair, we have a number of people who would like to speak. I'd like to bring in Councillor Jill Haynes, please, the portfolio holder for community, who's got some point to make first.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to comment, please, on the Visit Dorset. We were quite surprised about the number of people who said they didn't know about Visit Dorset, because we have 2.6 million visits a year to that website. So it's perhaps an indication of the kind of people who were filling in the consultation, as opposed to the general public, if you might understand what I'm saying there. In addition to that, we have about 15 million social media hits a year and about 85,000 followers to our pages. So I think that we have got people engaged on that. There is definitely room for improvement with the website. We are engaged currently with, we've got 600 members of the community that are with us on that site. But as we're moving forward with this, we do need to look at how we might engage better. I'd also like to say that I have been involved in meetings with all of the town councils personally, and we have been looking at how we might encourage them to promote their areas. Councillor Fry is exactly right. It isn't just the town itself. It's a little wider, and a lot of that happens already through networking. So if you go to visitor attraction A, you will find details of other attractions and so on. So this is work going forward, and I'll be quiet now, but may come back if there are further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Yeah, I must admit, I'm very keen on us looking at some sort of app for mobile phones, because that's the way forward, to be fair. I mean, I went to Snowdon, I was going to say recently, it's not recently, I've been stuck in here for a year. But I went to Snowdon, the first thing he did was download the Snowdon app, and it told you everything about the area, absolutely. So something like that developed would be useful. Councillor Fry, who's next?
Councillor Jesperson would like to talk on Visit Dorset, but I do have Councillor Beryl Ezard, who I'm just stacking up at the moment, so to speak. So Councillor Jesperson, did you have a point to make about Visit Dorset?
I did, yes, thank you very much. Oh, have I just frozen? No, yes.
No,
when I was the portfolio holder on the North Dorset District Council Cabinet, I was doing a lot of work with Visit Dorset, and the chief thrust of the discussions we were having is that Visit Dorset is really a very powerful tool at promoting and selling tourism in the coastal smile, as we call it, the coastal strip, but was much less effective at selling tourism or at promoting tourism in all the rural parts of the county, where tourism is, of course, a very important part of the local economy. Now, part of the reason for this is because the scale of the tourism in the northern part of the county, the rural tourism, tends to be smaller scale and more incidental, so it's farmers who are also doing glamping, that sort of thing, and therefore they haven't bought in to the Dorset Council, the Visit Dorset website in quite the same way. Members should know that Dorset Council doesn't subsidise Visit Dorset. It's one of our services that washes its own face, and that's very, very important that we know that people who are promoted on Visit Dorset, they pay for that service as part of their business planning and their marketing, and so we need to find a way of marketing Visit Dorset equally to those parts of the tourism industry that are not in the coastal smile. That we had begun that piece of work, as I say, when I was at North Dorset, but we do need now to pick it up because I think it slightly has fallen into someone's pending tray. If we can do that and get the northern part of the tourism industry as heavily supported by Visit Dorset as the coastal tourism is, then we'll have gone a very long way to addressing some of these issues. And I think, therefore, that that should be an absolute priority to get Visit Dorset back talking to rural tourism venues. And I'm sure that they will do that now that there's more time.
Thank you, Sherry. That's excellent points. There is a comment in the comments back part, which basically comes from Jill Haynes, and it says, "Good point, Sherry. As I will look into this along with ECC development partners." So that's been looked at, and the portfolio holder has picked that up. Councillor Fry, who's next?
Chair, Councillor Beryl Ezard, please.
Councillor Ezard.
Oh, thank you, Chair. As the obviously one of the Wareham members, and I'm also on the Wareham Town Council, I think the Town Council itself seemed to misunderstand what were, you know, what was the question was. And talking to the cabinet member, we did have a bit of a query about that. I mean, I've supported that the local council and obviously an organisation actually take on the TIC because it's very flourishing in Wareham, and it does support like places, events like Camp Festival and things like that at Lowworth. So it's not just Wareham. And so really, you know, I'm very supportive and put out a plea to local organisations about taking on. One question I want to ask is, would the presence of the tourist information be able to stay in the library? You know, it's obviously owned by Dorset Council because it's such a central place, and that element of it would help tremendously, even if we had to pay rent. So could the cabinet member answer that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's something I don't think anybody will answer at this stage, but I'll go to Councillor Haynes, because that's going to be part of the discussions between Dorset Council and the local authorities moving forward, I would imagine. Right. But Councillor Haynes, have you got a response?
You're entirely right, Councillor Turner. This is all part of the negotiations, and in some cases the library is not necessarily the best place moving forward, but we don't know until we've had those discussions.
As I thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Fry.
Councillor Ryan Hope is next, please, Chair.
Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a question, and apologies if I've missed this in the report, but I note recommendation 1 says Dorset Council directly stops funding TICs. Is there an implementation date where that funding will cease to happen?
There is in the paper, but I can't remember the top of my head.
Would you like me to come back, Chairman?
Yeah, please.
So the funding is likely to end at the end of this financial year. However, we still have money to help support that going forward. And as it says in the papers, we still have some number of months of negotiation with staff as we go forwards as well. So actually the idea is that that this will stop at the end of the financial year.
Thank you. You happy with that, Councillor Hope?
Just to follow up then, if I may, Chair. Obviously, I'm slightly concerned by that. Is it too quick? Whilst, you know, is there any way we can find the funds to continue to support these with a cut-off date until they're transferred? My concern is, obviously, we've already discussed earlier within this meeting that with COVID regulations lifting, we are set for staycations, and Dorset will be, I think, a favourite destination for that. And after the last sort of 12 months that a lot of our businesses have had in the area, I think they need all the support they can from Dorset council to market themselves and Dorset as a whole. And as Councillor Fry's already said, that these TICs don't just answer questions on the 3 towns they're situated, they answer queries and support for the whole of Dorset. You know, so I'm just wondering, is there any way that funds can be made available to extend until the transition, and then we can obviously look to hand staff over where staff is needed, and go that way.
Well, my reading of what Councillor Haynes just said was basically is by the end of this financial year, which takes us well into next year, and then the discussions to take place following that.
No, Chairman, it's this financial year, so this will be this April.
Ah, right, okay.
But what we are doing currently is we are using those staff, and they are actually answering emails and are involved in engaging that way with people while we're doing lockdown. And I imagine that will continue for some time to come.
Okay. Yeah, I've got to admit, this has been going on for many years. I was actually the lead member at West Dorset on the working group that looked at TICs in 2014. So this should be no great surprise to most, to be honest. And obviously the financial position we find ourselves in is a difficult one. Okay, there's nobody else in the chat bar wishing to speak. What I'm looking for then is a proposer and seconder for the recommendations as written.
Happy to propose, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Jefferson.
And the seconder?
Councillor Starr, I'm willing to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. We have a proposer and seconder. All those in favour? Are there any against? Are there any?
Chair, Councillor Hope against.
Councillor one against. That's going to be recorded. Thank you. Any abstentions? If that's the case, that is carried. Thank you very much. Right, moving on. Item 9 is our Place and Resources Overview Committee forward plan. I just need to make it clear, it looks very, very sparse, and it is very, very sparse in the fact that we have not any items to date moving forward. We are working with the executive directors of Place and Resources to prioritise these topics, and we have a large list, but we just need to make sure we're going to get best value out of doing the right ones at the right time. Are there any questions on the forward plan as it is? Okay, I see Councillor Jones.
Sorry, me again. I don't know, this might be completely not allowed, but are we allowed to make a suggestion or a recommendation for anything that you haven't got down at all? Can we bring forward an idea?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, may I take this opportunity to do so now then? Okay. When we first started this council, under Jill Haynes's leadership, we had an EAP on rural access to services. And one of the recommendations within that is one that I feel very strongly that as a council we should push forward, which is a wheels to work. And I spoke with Ray Bryan, I've spoken with Knock, who both hold those leadership roles in that portfolio, and they were both keen. But I don't know how to get it onto a formal agenda, because there is actually some money in the pot to kick this off. And especially now with unemployment, with everything the way it is, if we can find a way of getting young people to interviews and people to work with a set of wheels, whether it's an electric scooter or a moped, I just want to get it on an agenda somewhere, because there's a pot of 11,000 we can access to kick this off, and I just think it's a really important move.
Right, thanks, Councillor Jones. I did speak to Councillor Lacey Clark 2 days ago on bringing something to the committee on transport, sustainable green travel, all that sort of package. I know Councillor Lacey Clark was here earlier. I don't know whether he's still with us, but Knock, would you like to make any comments on that? Because I think it obviously fits with the discussion we had the other day.
Hi, Chairman. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm having some IT issues, so I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, yes.
Fantastic, super, because my chat bar isn't working, so I tried to comment previously. Absolutely, there is a kind of emerging kind of idea and plan, which I will be presenting with Councillor Bryan to yourself, Councillor Turner, about a possible piece of work and policy that could be created on uniting a vision for rural transport for the whole of Dorset. I think that's going to cover a lot of different areas, and it'll have been quite a large piece of work. I'm currently working on a briefing note for it in some terms of reference, and obviously I'll meet with you to discuss that, if that's okay, Chairman.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Could I just suggest that Councillor Jones just floats an idea past you as part of that package?
Absolutely, Councillor Jones has actually in the past, and it was
right,
something we looked into, and we couldn't adopt it there and then, but there is no reason it couldn't be considered as part of this going forward.
That's excellent. It's just in some assurance that it's going to come to our work programme in the nearish future. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chairman. I'd imagine it to be coming for a conversation with myself and you within the next month for certain.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Nock.
Super, thank you.
Chair,
yeah,
you've got Councillor Pauline Baxton would like to speak, please.
Yeah, and I just made a comment in the chat bar. There's a comment from Councillor Ray Bryan, who's the portfolio holder. The discussions are taking place as we speak, so that's happening. Councillor Batstone.
As ever, to support my colleague Councillor Jones, Chairman, because not only is there money, but there are people around who were experienced in running the previous Wheels to Work scheme who would love to see it getting going again. So we have colleagues, former colleagues, that we can work with to explore this scheme thoroughly and see if it's viable again. Thank you, Chair.
That's excellent. I think with the onset of the electric bikes these days as well, that gives you other options as we move that forward. Thank you.
It's a long way from North Dorset down to Dorchester on an electric bike, Chairman.
But think of the views along the way, Councillor Batstone.
Where's your sense of adventure, Councillor Batstone?
Okay. The other thing we were going to review on this was the Cabinet Forward Plan, but to be fair, I've had a look at it. There are a number of items in the plan for place and resources, which I think we will look at in the very near future. So I've got no other comments. Are there any comments about the forward plan from other members? If not, we will move on. Okay. We will move on. Item 10, urgent items. You'll be pleased to know that we have none. And item 11 is exempt business. And again, you will be pleased to hear there is no exempt business. I'd like to thank you all for your participation today. It's really great to have good questions from a good committee. Meeting closed at 11:21. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Chairman.